Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Diana. Thank you for that kind introduction. You're really in for a treat today. I was backstage with some of your panelists who are up next. They're going to do a fantastic job, and so my effort largely here is to get out of the way so that you can hear from some real talent. I want to thank you to send a thanks to Jeremy and to Dylan and to everyone at J Street for being such friends of mine during my coming of age on American foreign policy and our role in the world, and for inviting me here. J Street is an important ally for those of us in the United States Senate who consider ourselves friends of Israel and friends of the U.S.-Israel relationship. You are a critical partner for those of us who still believe in the transformative power of diplomacy. You are a vital contributor to the debate over the future of the Middle East. And I'm really here just to applaud you for all of the work that you have done and continue to do, and really the remarkable growth that you have seen over a very short period of time. You know, these days, a lot of us in the Senate are talking a lot about Supreme Court politics, and I've been thinking, both in the context of that debate and in preparation for today, about maybe my most favorite jurists. As a young law school student, I loved reading Oliver Wendell Holmes, and I thought about him as I was thinking about what to say here this morning. During Justice Holmes' senior year in college, he voluntarily enlisted in the Massachusetts militia in order to join the Union Army during the Civil War. And frankly, few soldiers saw more action than Holmes did. He fought in the Wilderness Campaign, he was at Chancellorsville, he was at Antietam. He nearly died, and he saw hundreds of his friends and fellow soldiers fall to vicious injuries. He returned to Boston scarred deeply by what he saw. And his experience in the Civil War, it deeply affected his view of the law as a professor and then later as a jurist. In an era where the Revolutionary era natural law theory still abounded, Holmes said this. He said, quote, "Men make their own laws. These laws do not flow from some mysterious omnipresence in the sky." With his own eyes, he had seen the horror of the Civil War, where each side would not capitulate because they believed in the natural basis for their cause. Holmes founded a new legal school of what's called legal realism, the understanding that law was based in power and in politics. And I think about Holmes a lot when I'm told that all policy that flows from the bosom of a just cause must be in and of itself just as well. I think about Holmes when I'm told that if one thing is black or white, then everything else that flows from it must also be black or white. America's support for Israel is absolute. It is a black and white issue. My belief in the righteousness of a permanent Jewish state in the Middle East, it's unbreakable, and I'd suspect that if you're in this hall today, you believe the same. But the man who will likely be the next ambassador to Israel called my work on behalf of Israel anti-Semitic, simply because I don't agree with his particular position on the future of Israel. And I wasn't alone in being on the receiving end of this scorn. He called the president's actions anti-Semitic as well, and I don't have to tell you what he called all of you. Now, Mr. Friedman gave a remarkable performance before the Foreign Relations Committee, upon which I sit. He effectively recanted almost every strong statement that he has made, castigating those of us who support Israel, without perfectly parroting the positions and statements of the current Israeli government. And though it seems more than a little bit coincidental that this epiphany about the hurtfulness of his words happened to occur at the exact moment of his confirmation, I hope he's telling the truth. I truly hope that he regrets these words. Because while our nation's support for Israel cannot be questioned, we do have to ask some questions about what it means to say that you support Israel. In his legal writings, Holmes begged us to consider all opinions, not to be so close-minded as to shudder debate, refusing to see all sides. He knew that the Civil War was a just cause, but the inability to see the other side's perspective doomed the war to last too long, taking countless unnecessary lives. J Street demands the space to expand the scope of what it means to be pro-Israel, to be passionately, vigorously pro-Israel, to understand that if you're for Israel, you don't have to be blind to the cause of the Palestinians, to understand that if you are for Israel, you don't have to reject the genius of diplomacy. I don't support settlement construction inside the generally accepted boundaries. I don't support settlement construction inside the generally accepted boundaries of a future Palestinian state because I support Israel, right? A two-state future is essential for Israel's long-term survival. As Ehud Barak explained, if you put in one room all the living former heads of Mossad, the Shin Bet, and the Israel Defense Forces, more than 90% of them would say that it's simpler to protect Israel from a border that assures our security interests next to a Palestinian state than to protect a greater Israel with millions of Palestinians living under its control. Putting up more and more settlements makes a future viable, sustainable Palestinian state less likely. Now, I was one of the first senators to announce my support for the Iran nuclear agreement because I support Israel. A nuclear Iran would be a disaster for Israel. And in the first year of this agreement, there is no doubt that it is working and that Israel is safer because of it. More than 2/3 of Iran's centrifuges have been removed. 98% of the enriched uranium has been shipped out of the country. The Arak reactor has been removed and the core filled with cement. The most intrusive inspections regime ever negotiated, giving the IAEA all the necessary access to Iran, is happening now. Iran is complying with the deal. I thought it was a horrible, dangerous idea for Prime Minister Netanyahu to speak against the agreement in Congress because I support Israel. His visit to Congress in order to try to influence a domestic political debate only served to heighten the growing politicization of this issue, the issue of Israel in Congress. It made it look falsely like Republicans stood with Israel and Democrats didn't. His speech didn't affect the outcome of the debate. It just served to help Republicans who wanted to turn support for Israel into an election year wedge issue. And finally, I oppose President Trump's Muslim ban because I support Israel. Last week, I stood at the New Haven area Jewish Community Center talking about the fear that is sweeping across communities in Connecticut and across the nation because of this vicious increase in hate speech against Jews. But how can we effectively push back against this hate speech when our government is proposing to pass hateful discriminatory policies against another religious group? We need to urgently come together to oppose the anti-Semitism that has come roaring back into public view. Just this past weekend, a dozen more swastikas and racial slurs were drawn on cars and buildings in Buffalo, New York. We need to come together, Republicans and Democrats, liberals and conservatives, to condemn it, to stop it now. And our government needs to be morally consistent in condemning discrimination and violence against all religious groups. And so I'm thrilled to be here with you today, to be as a member of the Foreign Relations Committee at the center of what is a very perilous moment for the world. As the fires of the Middle East continue to burn, I'm watching the influence of the United States shrink in real time as the Trump administration, frankly, fumbles its way through its initial forays into international relations. The only thing that's consistent about this administration's foreign policy so far is that every day it changes. That's bad news for Israel, frankly, and our other allies across the world who rely on the consistency of American influence. But what's also bad for Israel is a debate in the United States where some people try to say that there is only one set of policies that is considered to be pro-Israel. As has always been the case, there has to be room for debate within the pro-Israel community about what U.S. policy best serves the long-term security interests of a Jewish state in the Middle East. And that's what J Street stands for, creating that room for debate and making sure that there is a place in that debate for progressive pro-Israel voices. Now, I know that this seems like a more difficult endeavor today than it has been in the past, and it is, frankly. Your work is going to be more difficult over the next 4 years than it has been before, but you're here because you know this. It is also going to be more important that you invest in this debate over the next 4 years than it ever has been before. And so I'm just going to leave you with some closing words from Justice Holmes. If you ever have a chance, read a brilliant speech he gave, I think in 1884, during Memorial Day. And after speaking about all of the factors that are outside of one's control when trying to take on a just but difficult cause, he reminded his audience that, quote, "the one and only success which it is his to command is to bring to his work a mighty, mighty heart." Having worked with J Street since its beginnings, having seen your power, your influence, your command here grow, knowing the urgency of the cause to which you all subscribe, I know that when it comes to a mighty heart, J Street has this in spades. And I'm so pleased to be an ally of yours in this fight. Thank you very much for having me here this morning.